In the wild where the prairies meet the sky, there's a sly creature with a gleam in his eye. He's got many names, but we all know him well. Coyote the trickster, his stories we tell.
His Own Game by C.O. Ebert, appearing in the short story collection Hades' Ascendant and others. More weird tales from the Ophelia-verse. Luther Bastian Devereux kicked the tourist one more time. Devereux still held the switchblade with which he had cut the man's Achilles tendons in one hand, as the toe of his tan cowboy boot collided with two of the man's ribs. The tourist half walked and half crawled in pain on the hot desert floor beneath him, spinning around in circles, unable to stand because of his injuries or even see due to the twice-wrapped pillowcase Devereux had placed over his head. "Spinning in circles 'cause you can't see, Kimosabe?" asked Devereux. Devereux bent down and grabbed the man by the shoulders. "Hold still and I'll get this off you," he said, removing the pillowcase forcefully. The man fell on his side. "Please," he muttered through parched lips. "Please." "Please isn't a sentence," Devereux mocked. "Please what?" "Please, let me go. You said you'd let me go if I told you what hotel I was staying at," the man cried, his face still covered with cuts from a full day of Devereux's tortures. Devereux kicked the man in the side again, this time cracking ribs. "While we were recapping the day's events, Kimosabe," said Devereux, "you told me you are staying at the Motel 7 on Route 454 in room 28, where your girlfriend waits for me. Or should I say, waits for you? See, I use your cell phone to text her back and forth. She's supposed to wait for you in something sexy she's got saved up for a special occasion, and you're supposed to come in with the lights off and have some fun from there. Don't worry, buddy. It's all going to go down as planned. I'm going to stand in for you, though, and after I'm done, I'm going to drive a girl out here to meet up with you. Now, as far as letting you go, I've already done that. You, Kimosabe, are not held down, tied up, or handcuffed. You're a free man." "You swore you wouldn't kill me," the man cried. "I'm not," said Devereux. "I have laid my final hand on you already, and will visit you with no more of my weapons or implements. I shall molest you no further, Kimosabe. You are a free bird. I mean, if your wounds kill you. If the heat of the desert kills you, then that's between you and them. Not that it matters, but we're about a good 3 miles from the highway. Good luck walking or crawling. Personally, I've been driving out of here. I gotta go meet your girl, Daisy, was it? Yeah, Daisy. So I'm gonna need a motor, Kimosabe." Devereux made for the car. In a sense, what he had said was true. Though his direct actions had ended 17 lives, Luther Bastian Devereux had never felt the life drain out of a man or a woman as he strangled them to death, nor had he slit a throat or shot someone with a gun. His weapon of choice, aside from the knickknacks used in the preliminary preparation of his prey, was the desert. He could honestly say that every one of his victims was alive the last time he saw them. Devereux removed the black sport coat he wore over his black T-shirt top that went with his black jeans and was contrasted only by his oddly tan cowboy boots. He threw the coat in the back seat and raised his sinewy arm to wipe his red mussed hair from his cool steel blue eyes. He regarded himself in the mirror and gritted his perfectly aligned but badly yellowed teeth. He threw the AC on full blast in the car and swigged down half the 2-liter bottle of water the man had had with him when he had accepted a ride from Devereux. Devereux thought pouring water out into the sand in front of the man would be a nice finishing touch, so he got back out of the car and was beginning to form his first quip to the man when he could hardly believe what he saw. The man was crawling on his knees, leaning, his upper body with desperation into the largest prairie wolf anyone had ever seen. The thing was closer in size to a pony than a normal coyote. The creature was taking careful, calculated steps so the weakened man would not lose its balance on its back, and was leading the man in the correct direction of the highway. "Get!" said Devereaux, throwing the bottle at the prairie wolf. The bottle landed near the thing, and it paid no regard. The creature kept pulling his weakened passenger. Devereaux knew that even the strongest man was no match for an animal, and so he went to the glove box, where he kept the revolver, which was usually only for intimidation. He fired a shot at the creature. It didn't even react. Devereaux got within a few feet of it and fired once more, twice more, point blank into the thing's skull. It stared at him for a moment, and if it was possible for a canine to convey disgust with its face, then that's what would have been seen in the creature's face. Finally, if he couldn't stop the train, he'd ruin the cargo. He aimed straight for the head of the man the coyote was carrying and fired. In an instant, the man's brains were splattered onto the desert floor, and the full and grand coat of fur on the prairie wolf's back was also covered in the gore. The animal let the man go and circled around him. It opened its mouth and slobbered a huge ball of spittle onto the dead man. Then it began to push sand onto him with its front paw. Now it regarded Devereaux. It charged at him, and Devereaux fired again. As before, there was no effect. The animal leapt at Devereaux and pinned him to the ground. It put its muzzle to his throat, and to his surprise, only sniffed him. Immobilized, he watched in horror as it adopted a posture he had only ever before seen in a dog that was about to hump something. And as the midday sun blocked out Devereaux's vision, the thing turned into a silhouette. Then it did something which was not what he was expecting. It peed on him, soaked him with its urine, as if he'd been out in a downpour. And as soon as it seemed convinced Devereaux was wet enough, it leapt off him and charged off into the horizon. Devereaux sat there for a moment, bewildered. Then reality set in, and he knew he'd best be making his way out of here. This was now most definitely a crime scene. Devereaux kicked the door before he got in. He liked being in total control of these situations, and the animal had caused him to lose all control. "This is my goddamn desert, you stupid fucking coyote," he said with rage. He was so angry that he failed to notice the rather salient fact that he was bone dry, and didn't stink to high heavens. He was dry even too quickly for the desert heat, even with the aridness, to account for it. His mind went back to Daisy in room 28, who would be waiting for him at the Motel 7 on Route 454. He checked himself again to see if he smelled like piss, and he didn't. He also made sure he still had the man's hotel key, and yes, it was there. He made his way back to the highway via the landmarks he knew, and in 20 miles' time he had connected to Route 454. His stomach growled at him and reminded him even serial killers needed to eat, and along with their twisted bloodlusts, were still subject to all the hungers which the rest of humanity was. The only option between here and the hotel would be Tessie's. It was a combination diner, rest stop, and gas station, and it was the only place for 50 miles in either direction. Its only neighbors closer than that were a series of abandoned strip mines and an equally abandoned creationism theme park, which was closed after its proprietor was arrested for fraud before he could really get it off the ground. Devereaux had time. He needed a few hours before Daisy would be ready for him anyway. He had sent her a few more texts on the drive, which consisted of concocted reasons he couldn't speak to her and could only text, as well as a few well-placed reminders to ensure that the plan he had in mind to ensnare his next victim went off without a hitch. Devereaux didn't want any more surprises today. He entered Tessie's and ignored the "Please wait for your hostess to seat you" sign and plopped down in a booth whose seats were lined with red cracked vinyl. In a few minutes, an old man, who was most definitely not Tessie, came up to him. "Do you need a menu?" the old man asked. "Western omelet," said Devereaux. "We don't have a Western omelet," said the old man. New plan, said Devereaux. Cream, chipped beef and grits then, side of melted butter and black coffee. Devereaux watched the old man retreat to the lunch counter and was not even aware another figure had strided up to his table. "Wow, grits! I knew I smelled something in here that was for me," said a nasal voice. "How deserty. Or are grits southern?" Devereaux looked up and saw a skinny man. Skinny save for his still somehow having a remarkably dangling beer gut, who stood about 6'2". The man had thick-lensed Buddy Holly-style glasses, a big nose and buck teeth. He wore badly worn white Converse sneakers and a black t-shirt with a logo of a man climbing a mountain in a desert, which was emblazoned with the words, "The Desert Rocks," with an exclamation points. Crisp blue jeans that looked like they were from the 1980s but were probably still so fresh because the man had only worn jeans a few times in his life since then. He had graying hair that receded back over the dome of his head and was pressed by sweat and grease into a half comb-over onto his mottled skin. The look was completed by a fanny pack, which, despite its name, the man wore on his crotch, with the outline of a coyote and a rainbow cursive set of letters which spelled the word coyote, again with an exclamation point. Superfluous at the end. The man couldn't have had tourist written all over him better if he was tattooed with it on his forehead. He had obviously picked up the fanny pack and t-shirt somewhere within the last day. Devereaux was already repelling man with a death scowl, and one of his inner impulses was already preparing some rather nasty words when it was restrained on its trip to his larynx by a rather cooler set of thoughts. "Wait," it said inside his head. Wait. This man is the most perfect pawn for our game yet. We can play with him and still get to Daisy in time, but we gotta put on the friendly face to reel him in. Friendly face is gonna work on this boy like a dream," the voice said. "Grits about every way except back north," Devereaux replied to the man's earlier comment, now beaming with a smile with his yellow teeth. "Why don't you sit down and I'll show you the proper way to eat grits?" The man took a seat across from Devereaux, plopping down with force. "Gosh, that sure is nice of you, mister," said the tourist. "Devereaux," said the killer, extending his hand. "Luther Bastian Devereaux, and you are—" "The trickster," said the man. "You're Luther, and I'm the trickster. Maybe we should go team up against Batman and Superman." He excitedly accented his horrible pun by raising his fists in the air. Devereaux tried to smile at the man's joke. "I'm pretty sure Batman fights the Joker, not the trickster. And Superman's rifle is a Lex Luthor, not Luther. But I don't read them comic books. Just call me Devereaux." You can call me Bob," said the man. "What are you doing out here, Bob?" asked Devereaux. "Looking for a ride out of here at the moment, Mr. Devereaux," said Bob. "Well," said Devereaux, "I'll tell you what, Bob. You seem like you can make an interesting conversation, and everybody knows interesting conversation makes the drive go faster. Where are you headed?" "Gosh, Mr. Devereaux, you think you could give me a ride? Well, see, I gotta make it to Maitland County Hospital by the end of the night, down the other end of 454. "I'm headed down that way myself. You got a friend there, family, nothing serious, I hope," said Devereaux. "Oh, I got a buddy, but he's gonna be just fine, Mr. Devereaux. If you give me a lift, that'd be swell. Tell you what, I'll pay for the grits then." Bob beamed. "I knew I liked you, Bob, from the moment I set eyes on you," Devereaux grimaced. Devereaux and Bob ate their grits, and Devereaux made several comments about the proper Texan way to eat them versus the Louisiana way, something he was making up on the spot, and complimented Bob on what a great Texan-style grits eater he was for a first-timer. "You sure you never ate grits Texas-style before?" asked Devereaux jokingly. "You seem like a Texas-style champ. Are you fibbing to me, Bob?" "Oh, I'd never lie to you, Mr. Devereaux. I never lied in my life, never to anyone," said Bob. He even laughed at Bob's butchered pop culture jokes, one of which involved referring to Britney Spears as Kathy Spears, and another equally outdated one entailing the Fonz mistakenly being called Funzy. When they got in the car, Devereaux was relieved that Bob asked to fiddle with the radio and sang along horribly, one might add, to things which he found that he liked. This spared Devereaux from having to make small talk with Bob until they could get further away from Tessie's and Devereaux could find an excuse to pull onto one of the side roads that weaved in and out of the old strip mines. As Bob managed to actually violate music, despite it not being a tangible thing, Devereaux looked ahead, spying for the perfect entry point to the old service roads. Devereaux started pumping the gas with irregular surges to make the car lurch. "Oh, damn it," Devereaux feigned. Bob turned the radio down. "Oh, no," said Bob. "Is the car okay?" "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing," said Devereaux. "We better pull off the main road, though, while I check her out. Trucks come up here so fast that being on the shoulder, it could be real trouble for us if we got hit from behind. So we'd best turn in there." "Gosh," said Bob. They were now headed down the old service road, brush and desert on the driver's side of them, and the terraced ridges of the old strip mine on their left. Devereaux let the car run naturally for a moment. "Well," said Devereaux, pretending to be surprised, "she seems she's running fine now. Let me take her up to speed for a sec so we can make sure we're past any trouble before we get back on the highway." This was all, of course, a ruse to get them further away from the main highway. When he felt they had reached sufficient distance, Devereaux stopped the car. "Is the car okay, Mr. Devereaux?" asked Bob. "She's just fine. You shouldn't be worried about her," said Devereaux. Devereaux leaned over the glove box, his head near Bob's lap. "Pardon me," said Devereaux. "I'm not trying to get friendly with you. Just need something out of here." He stealthily removed the gun from the glove box when he was seated back on his side of the car and aimed it at Bob, who seemed bewildered. "Get out of the car," Devereaux growled. "Gosh," said Bob, "it's hot out there. Really hot. I don't know if I want to get out." Devereaux looked at him with surprise. Did this man think this was a game? If it was Devereaux's game. Was Bob impaired in some way? "Get out of the car, Bob, or I'm going to blow your fucking brains out," said Devereaux. "Like I said," repeated Bob, still very calm, "it's hot out there, and here it's nice and air-conditioned." Devereaux knew he couldn't shoot the man, or the game would end prematurely, and there would be a mess in his car that the cleaning supplies he kept in the trunk wouldn't be able to handle. He decided to switch weapons to the switchblade he had cut his earlier victim's heels with. A good flesh wound from his trusty knife should send a message even into Bob's thick skull. Devereaux was a wiry but powerful man. With full force, he pushed the blade down into the meat of Bob's thigh. In an instant, Devereaux pulled back his own bloodied wrist and hand. Bob was unharmed. His jeans weren't even ripped. The blade had pushed its way out of Devereaux's hand and cut him badly. Bob may as well have been made of granite. "Gosh, Mr. Devereaux," said Bob, "maybe we both need some air. Maybe we should step out of the car." Bob got out of the car and strode to the edge of the strip mine. "Wow," said Bob, "quite a view," shouting back to the still-seated Devereaux, who was tending to his wound. Devereaux regained his strength and flew out of the driver's side and ran around the car toward Bob. With his unwounded hand, he aimed a solid fist for the back of Bob's head and broke several bones as it hit what was like hitting solid steel. He fell backward with pain. Devereaux clenched his eyes tightly shut, and when he opened them, it seemed Bob had moved so that he was now standing facing the precipice, looking into the old terraced mine. But he had his back to the flat, desert side of the road and was looking at Devereaux. "Geez, Mr. Devereaux, you look hurt," said Bob. "You son of a bitch!" said Devereaux. Devereaux charged at the man full force, intending to tackle Bob to the ground and beat the life out of him, but instead he went through Bob and tumbling down the angled slope of the open strip mine, which should have been on the other side of the road. When Devereaux came to, he felt more pain than he thought was possible. He tried to move his neck and heard a crunchy cracking sound like the breaking of a boiled lobster's outer shell before a seafood lover devours it. Luther Bastian Devereaux beheld his own body, or what was left of it, His black sport coat and t-shirt had been bleached gray by several days in the sun. Where his t-shirt ripped, the skin over his rib cage was like thin white leather. In several places his rib cage plainly showed through. He could not see most of his legs, as his badly mangled body was twisted into a shape that did not permit it. He did spy on a lower ledge an upright, standing tan cowboy boot with a human tibia and fibula poking out of it, which were cracked and bleached white. The pain was matched only by thirst. Devereaux was drier and thirstier than he thought possible. Bob was standing there. "Wow, Mr. Devereaux," said Bob. "You look terrible." Devereaux tried to speak, but only a wheezing whistle came from somewhere below his Adam's apple. "Oh, sorry," said Bob. "Try to talk now. You'll be able to, at least for a few minutes." "You bastard," said Devereaux. "What did you do to me?" "Me?" said Bob innocently. "I didn't do anything to you, Mr. Devereaux. You did this all to yourself. Well, in the desert, it did some of this to you, on the evaporation and the vultures and the maggots, like you always tell your victims. The only thing I did is keep you from dying all the way, in spite of it all. Like I kept that fellow from dying the day we met, Daisy's boyfriend. He's the one I went to visit in the hospital. Oh, he's fine now. Fine. He was released weeks ago. It's been weeks since your fall, Mr. Devereaux." No, said Devereaux. "He's dead. I blew his brains out, and I'm alive. He's dead, and I'm alive." "Oh, gosh, no. I let you see his brains get blown out. It was, well, I suppose you'd call it a mirage. But I carried him out of that desert, and I got him to the hospital. But you are right that you're alive, Mr. Devereaux. Unnaturally alive. But you are, and always will be, alive," said Bob. "Why?" cried Devereaux. "Well, sheesh. I mean, that one's as plain as the nose on your face, or the nose that was on your face. You should be glad you don't have a mirror, Mr. Devereaux. You're an evil son of a bitch who tortured people for pleasure, Mr. Devereaux. And despite the bad rap I get, I love people. Hell, I stole fire from the gods and gave it to people. Zeus chained me to a rock, and I had my lever picked out every day by a bird. Only since I'm immortal, it would grow back. That's how I know how much pain you're in. Been through it myself. Of course, Hercules freed me eventually," chuckled Bob. "Sadly for you, Mr. Devereaux, no one is ever going to free you from this." "What are you?" cried Devereaux. "I told you what I am when we sat down for grits," smiled Bob. "You fucking said your name was Bob." "I said you could call me Bob. I never said my name was Bob," said Bob. "I told you I'd never lie to you, and I never did. My name was Bob in that diner for you today. It was Prometheus in ancient Greece, Loki up the Norse way, Anansi in Africa, Raven way up at the poles, and around here, well, you grew up in Texas, so I know you know the natives this land rightly belongs to call me Coyote. Heck, my fanny pack even had a picture of a coyote and the word written on it. And if that wasn't obvious enough for you, I introduced myself to you plain as day. I told you that you were Luther, which you are. And I told you I'm the trickster. I never lied to you, Mr. Devereaux. I dangled lots of pretty illusions that you chased of your own free will, but I never lied to you." Just kill me," said Devereaux. "Oh, heavens no," said Bob. "Never, ever, ever will I kill you. The desert'll try. So will the vultures, and time. Time is going to want you dead, and it's going to torture you. But time owes me a favor. So of all the things it might do to you, I'll make sure you never, ever die." Bob undid whatever he had done that let Devereaux speak. And now the trickster god adopted the shape Devereaux first saw him in, the form which he was known best for in these lands. The great coyote once again urinated on the serial killer, but this moisture brought the living, shriveled cadaver no release from the intense dryness. "Oh, and by the way," said Bob's voice through the coyote form, which still lifted its leg to mark Devereaux's remains. "You were wrong, Mr. Devereaux, my Kemosabe. This is my desert."
In the wild where the prairies meet the sky, there's a sly creature with a gleam in his eye. He's got many names, but we all know him well. Coyote the trickster, his stories we tell. He's danced with the stars in the darkest night, played tricks on the moon till it shone so bright. With a mischievous grin he treads on sacred ground. Coyote the joker, he's always around. Oh, Coyote, the master of disguise, silver tongue and laughter in your eyes. Laughter in your eyes, you bring chaos and laughter wherever you roam. Coyote, our favorite trickster, make yourself at home. From the legends of old across many lands and time, he's the trickster god with tricks that are sublime. Prometheus in Greece and Anansi, the spider in the web. Loki to the Vikings, but around here Coyote's ahead. Oh, Coyote, you are naughty, but quite wise. You have clever craft, but never tell a lie. You keep us on our toes, but to those whose hearts are true, you're the trickster god, and we sing our praise to you. Our praise to you.